first tourists are returning, even as coronavirus is still spreading.
The recovery rate is higher than the transmission rate, so it's given us hope that we can ease restrictions.
Only domestic tourists are allowed in for now. Foreigners will have to wait until September. But with cases still surging in neighbouring Java and accelerating in Bali, some argue it's too dangerous to reopen.
We should be considering a rigid lockdown for 2 weeks, then re-evaluate if we can open safely.
Bali has had 48 deaths and 3,500 infections, vastly fewer than more populated areas of Indonesia, but most have been in the past month. Sri Lutfa and her husband became ill after he travelled to Java. She spent 82 days in hospital.
For those who come here for a holiday, it's risky, so it's better not to come.
But with hotels empty and thousands of Balinese out of work, authorities are desperate to revive the economy. They're hoping strict rules on social distancing will make Bali safe.
If we stay at home any longer, how can people in Bali earn a living?
Chinese and Russians are already booking holidays in Bali from next month. But with 6 million foreign tourists last year, it could be years before Bali's economy returns to normal. Anne Barker, ABC News.
The Philippines will reimpose a stricter coronavirus lockdown in and around the capital, Manila, for 2 weeks from tomorrow. The country is struggling to contain the number of infections, which now total more than 100,000. Doctors and nurses have called for tighter controls, saying the Philippines is losing the fight against COVID-19 and the health system is on the verge of collapse.
I fully understand why your health workers would like to ask for such a timeout period. They have been in the front lines for months and are exhausted.
Some businesses will be closed, public transport limited, and people will need work exemptions in order to move around the city. 2 NASA astronauts have returned to Earth in the first US water landing in 45 years. Their capsule splashed down in the Gulf of Mexico after 2 months on the International Space Station. It was a final key test for the new astronaut taxi service provided by Californian firm SpaceX.
Brace for splashdown.
An old-school landing for the next generation of astronauts.
We have visual confirmation for splashdown.
So visual, Florida locals flocked to the scene and had to be warned to stay away after poisonous gases were detected.
Something like this just really can endanger the whole thing, endanger the crew members and endanger themselves.
The Dragon capsule was showing the scorch marks from its descent from the International Space Station. Heat shields protected the astronauts from 2,000-degree temperatures.
The hatch is now open.
Just proud to be a small part of this whole effort to get a company people to and from the space station.
After a 2-month voyage, NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley were still finding their feet, but in good shape.
This has been quite an odyssey the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We brought the capability back to America, and we came home safely to our families.
They travelled in the first commercially built and operated spacecraft to carry people to and from orbit. And SpaceX CEO Elon Musk says it's just the beginning.
We're going to go to the moon. We're going to have a base on the moon. We're going to send people to Mars and make life multiplanetary.
NASA, too, seems pleased with the new arrangement.
We are entering a new era of human spaceflight where NASA is no longer the purchaser, owner, and operator of all the hardware. We are going to be a customer.
NASA has its sights set on regular flights to the moon within the next few years. Michael Troy, ABC News.
To finance, house prices in Victoria fell for the 3rd month in a row. On the markets, both the local share market and the Australian dollar were flat today. Here's Alan Kohler.
The national median house price has now fallen for 3 months in a row, but on a national basis at least, the decline isn't accelerating. In June it was down 0.7%, in July 0.6%. But in Sydney and Melbourne the fall did accelerate slightly, and Melbourne had a 2nd month in a row of more than 1% falls in prices. Other capital cities did better. Canberra and Adelaide saw prices rise even, while Hobart, Darwin, Brisbane and Perth fell, but less than Sydney and Melbourne. The declines in Sydney and Melbourne are about average so far, but not yet as deep as the most recent correction at the end of 2018. And apart from the direct impact of the pandemic, increasing supply and cutting demand for houses, there'll be a delayed impact of less population growth. Home building took nearly 10 years to respond to the increase in immigration in 2006, and that led to the big ramp up in house prices after that. But now the population rug has been pulled out, but construction will take time to respond again, which will weigh on prices. Share market was flat today, with banks and retailers falling in response to today's announcements in Victoria, while online retailer Kogan did pretty well, as did CSL and Telstra, among others. US and Asian markets rose solidly on Friday and today. Gold actually went above $2,000 US over the weekend and is still well up, along with silver, iron ore and oil. And the Australian dollar was steady today, just above 71 US cents. And that's finance.
A punctured tyre wasn't enough to stop Englishman Lewis Hamilton winning the British Grand Prix at Silverstone to continue his dominance of the Formula One season. Hamilton's Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas was in second place when he had a tyre blowout. Hamilton's car suffered a similar fate on the final lap, but he managed to reach the finish line ahead of Max Verstappen.
The checkered flag will come in the nick of time, and a record 7th British Grand Prix victory for the most wins at home. It's Lewis Hamilton.
Oh my God, I was just praying to try and get it round, not be too slow. I nearly didn't get round the last two corners, but thank God we did.
Carlos Sainz also had tyre trouble and was passed by Australian Daniel Ricciardo, who finished fourth to match his best results for Renault. The defending world champion Hamilton has won 3 of the 4 races held this season and leads the title race by 30 points. The organisers of the Paralympics say the event will go ahead after next year's delayed Olympic Games. The Paralympics were postponed like the Olympics earlier this year, but until today, organisers hadn't announced whether it would be rescheduled. The Games will begin next August, comprising 539 events in 22 sports. Organisers of both Games are yet to outline what will happen if the pandemic is still going. Antarctic winds are forecast to bring snowfalls down to 100 metres in Tasmania tomorrow morning. The predicted cold snap is bringing back memories of snow falling to sea level in Hobart 5 years ago, and it's also triggered warnings.
5 years ago today, many Tasmanians woke to a world of white. On August 3rd, 2015, snow blanketed Hobart suburbs. Toboggans became a mode of transport, and even surfers walked on snow-covered beaches. Weather forecasts say a snowy blast from the past is on the way.
We've got a cold front and a really cold air mass approaching with some really cold Antarctic air.
Snow should start falling on higher Hobart suburbs tonight. By morning, the snow line will drop to about 100 metres above sea level.
There could be some snow around, certainly on Mount Wellington and down into some of the Hobart suburbs. I wouldn't be surprised if Mount Nelson, Fern Tree, places like that saw some snow on the ground first thing in the morning.
Meteorologists are predicting low snow flurries, but don't expect snow to settle in the Hobart CBD or on beaches.
It's going to be fairly similar temperature-wise, but we're just not seeing the precipitation lining up with the coldest air to really see that significant snowfall right down to sea level this time round.
A repeat of the July 1986 snowfalls that blanketed Hobart CBD is even less likely. The cold snap will create dangerous conditions on many roads.
We're asking all motorists to drive to the conditions, be aware of snow and ice on the road, make sure that they slow down.
There's also a warning for bushwalkers in the Western and Central Highlands areas that if they get stranded, they may be on their own.
If there's low cloud conditions, it certainly can make helicopter operations either very dangerous or sometimes not able to be conducted.
Tasmanians are also being urged to play it safe when cranking up the heaters.
The Tasmanian Fire Service recommends keeping all flammable material at least 2 metres away from any heat source. It is a cause of fires in the past and it will continue if we don't keep them at least 2 metres away.
A message to rug up and stay safe. Laura Beavis, ABC News.
Time for the weather with Graham Creed.
Two low-pressure systems are drawing some very cold air up through the continent. Now, in Western Australia, it's also seeing some very heavy rainfall developing about the southern parts of the coast. We could see some localised heavy falls there. We've also got a pool of substantially cold air across the southeast. This is going to see snow to around 100 metres in Tasmania, about 300 metres for Victoria. But by the time that air mass moves into New South Wales, it still remains very cold, but there's not a great deal of moisture left. So any snowfall should be confined to the very far southern ranges. It'll be warm in Sydney ahead of that change. Temperatures will plummet, though, once it moves through. Very cold conditions and wet for Melbourne and Hobart, with snow in the Hobart suburbs.
Well, that's ABC News for now. I'll be back with more news in a moment. Stay with us on the ABC News channel.